Hello everyone and welcome to this month's top 10 match list. And before I jump into that, a couple of updates on the channel. A couple of things coming up in the next few days. My next Star Wars review is going to be coming up probably... I'm going to try and get it up before Saturday, but we'll see how well that goes. Also, my next live stream is coming up. Going to be watching Saturday night's main event number 17 and Clash of the Champions 16. And that should be really fun as usual. And if you haven't taken part in any of my live streams before, we have a really fun time there. Basically, they boil down to a question and answer session while I'm watching Saturday night's main event and Clash of Champions. So if that's something that appeals to you, if you want to ask me a question, just jump on the live stream. I'm going to shoot to have it sometime Sunday morning, maybe in the afternoon. We'll see, because my Saturday is going to be pretty busy. But yeah, I'll have one of those lined up for you. And on that live stream, I will also try to review the NXT UK shows that apparently aired on the network. I've gotten a few requests to watch and review those shows. So I'm going to try and watch those sometime before Sunday. I'll have reviews of those up during the live stream. And also I'm going to be reviewing Ring of Honor Best in the World, which I am attending Friday night. So I've got a few busy days coming up. A lot of wrestling related things to do, and none of them have to do with modern day, main roster WWE. I've got plenty of NXT, got New Japan, we got G1 Climax coming up, we've got ROH, we've got old school stuff like Saturday night's main event and Clash of Champions. Not all that interested in watching Raw or SmackDown. I'm just not. I heard Team Hill No reunited, which I guess that's neat, but I'm not, I haven't watched Raw and SmackDown in such a long time, I don't miss it, and I'm kind of like, yeah, I should keep this up. This is good. But anyway, let's talk about an era of WWE that was very exciting for me, and one that I look back on with a lot of nostalgia and reverence, and that's the Attitude Era. The Attitude Era was one of, if not the most exciting period for the WWE. It was right in the thick of the Monday Night War, and the Attitude Era was really their big answer to WCW and the rise of the NWO and all the stuff that was going on there. Their response, it's like, all right, WCW has this hot NWO angle. They've got all of our old stars like Hogan, Savage, and they eventually got Bret Hart at the end of '97 through the Montreal Screwjob and all the stuff that happened there. All right, we're going to respond by breaking all the rules, offering something fresh, new, and exciting. And for better or worse, the end result was the Attitude Era. Some of it was amazing. Some of it admittedly was not so great when you look at things like the Brawl for All and some of the nastier elements, shall we say, like some of the grosser segments with, say, Sexual Chocolate and Mark Henry, and some of the bad puns like PMS, the Pretty Mean Sisters, and a miscarriage angle, and pregnancies, and all sorts of other weird things that were going on. So a lot of the stuff with Mae Young wasn't that good. So not everything was peaches and cream with the Attitude Era, and I'm not going to pretend like it is, but the good stuff was really friggin' good and very exciting week to week. And, the good stuff was so good that you were willing to sit through the crap just to make it to the really good stuff. For every Kennel from Hell match, we got maybe 5 or 6 Austin versus Rock matches or something akin to that. So, and really that was where the Attitude Era really shined. What it was about and what really helped make it the era that it was. You can point to sex and violence and cursing and all these other things that made the Attitude Era work. What it really was that was the magic of that era that really put it over the top. You had all these larger-than-life characters like Stone Cold Steve Austin, like The Rock, like Mankind, like The Undertaker, like Kane, like DX, Shawn Michaels and Triple H, and all these other guys. And you put them in situations where you wanted to see them beat the crap out of each other, and it was believable that they wanted to beat the crap out of each other. And that's something that's somewhat lacking in today's overly scripted, overly produced era where, hardly anything feels believably real. Or like these guys really want to beat the crap out of each other, or they really want to win that championship. But Attitude Era, it was totally believable. When guys hated each other in the Attitude Era, you could feel it. And there was nothing more exciting when it was there. So I'm going to do a top 10 match list for the Attitude Era. Now, this is not a couple caveats before I make this list. The top 10 matches of the Attitude Era is not going to be based necessarily on quality or on which matches are my favorites. There were plenty of matches from this era that I loved. A perfect example is Undertaker versus Kane at WrestleMania 14. Love that match. I believe I had it at number 4 on my top 30 WrestleMania match list a few years ago. So you should know I really enjoy that match. It is not on this list because this list isn't about quality necessarily, or not about personal favorites. It's about which matches really define the era. Like, which ones, when you look back on the Attitude Era, which ones were the ones that gave it its attitude, for lack of a better term. So it's going to be based more on its significance rather than overall quality. Although some of these matches I adore, and I've got fond memories. I would say every match on this list I at least enjoy to some level, but they aren't necessarily my favorite ones of the era. But again, this is about historical significance more than anything else. So because of that, there's not really a ranking here either. So just because I put one match above the other in the list doesn't necessarily mean that it doesn't really mean anything. It's just kind of like, these are the 10 matches that came to my mind when I was putting together the most important matches in the history of the Attitude Era. And actually, I did some cheating as well. Some of them are series of matches. Like, it's like, okay, like, which match is more important? Like, okay, the Rock Austin matches, for example. I could quibble over which one's more important than the other, the 15 match or the 17 match, but really just put them all together, and it's like, because it's really Rock and Austin that is what made the Attitude Era important, and why I'm highlighting those matches. So some matches I grouped together mainly because of that, those reasons. But like I said, there's no official ranking here, so don't get too upset if I put one match above another, or don't think that I'm trying to make some kind of statement by putting one match above another. Really not. I just kind of made the list as I went along, and just stated them as they came to my brain. So don't think of this as like an official ranking. Think of it as like a Attitude Era match playlist to go check out on the WWE Network. It's like, hey, if you want like a really good best of highlight reel of the Attitude Era, at least the most significant parts of the Attitude Era, these are some matches you should check out. So that's really what the match is going to be, or what the list is going to be with these matches. So with all of that said, let's jump right into it. This should be fun. Okay, at number 10, I'm cheating right off the bat. We have a series of matches, the Mankind Rock series from late 1998 to early 1999. Now, these guys had a few pay-per-view matches. Most famously, they had the WWF Championship Tournament Finals at Survivor Series 1998, where The Rock turned heel, became the corporate champion, and Mankind got firmly established as one of the most sympathetic baby faces of the era. I've often said with Mankind, Mick Foley, that he wasn't like the big star of the era like Steve Austin was, but he was probably the most sympathetic and probably had my favorite character arc. Perfect correlation would be the Harry Potter series. Mankind wasn't Harry Potter, and he wasn't Ron, and he wasn't Hermione, but he was Neville Longbottom. Neville Longbottom, to the Harry Potter series, wasn't treated like he was one of the main kids, but when you look at his story arc, he was one of the most lovable of the kids, and probably had the most satisfying character development of anybody else in the series. And if you haven't read the Harry Potter books, highly recommend it. Neville's awesome. But really, I always make that comparison with Mankind. Oh, he's Neville Longbottom. That's basically what he is. And when you have such a sympathetic, lovable, goofball babyface against this ultra cool heel in The Rock, they just made magic together. And like I said, the series, even though they had a few triple threat matches with Shamrock a couple months earlier, the steel cage match at, oh God, I believe it was Breakdown 98. It was either Breakdown or Judgment Day. I believe it was Breakdown now. And I think Judgment Day was the Shamrock Mankind match where Mankind put the mandible claw on himself to pass himself out and get out of the ankle lock. But anyway, these guys would have two very significant matches. First of all, the one in early Raw 1999 where Mankind, in my personal favorite moment in Raw history, defeated The Rock to win the championship with help from Stone Cold Steve Austin, and the show ends with him doing his victory lap around the ring. My personal favorite moment in Raw history, and one of those rare wrestling moments that kind of brings a tear to my eye whenever I see it. It's like, man, that's some good storytelling right there. You moved me emotionally, and I'm super happy. That's what I like to see out of my wrestling. And their most famous match together was the Royal Rumble encounter where they faced off in the I Quit match. One of the hardest matches to watch, especially at the end, where Rock is just wailing on Mick with the steel chair, screaming at him to say I quit. Say I quit! Whack! Say I quit! Whack! Just one of the most brutal, violent beatdowns a heel has ever given a babyface. It's one of the reasons when I saw the John Cena Randy Orton I Quit match at Breaking Point, I want to say it was Breaking Point 09. That match, they tried to sell it like Cena was being tortured like no other, and it was so softball compared to this match that it was like, oh please, don't even. Mick Foley somewhere is like, Mick Foley's sitting around somewhere going, yeah, that's cute, but that match was so brutal, and I felt so bad for Mick by the time it was done. And it's actually one of Michael Cole's best calls. I think, for all the shit we give Michael Cole, I thought he did an excellent job in that match, just begging Mankind to quit, just so the pain can stop. And Mankind and The Rock, they had excellent chemistry, and they had a last man standing match in February that was really good, although paled in comparison to the I Quit match. They also... Another quite famous encounter they had was the empty arena match at Halftime Heat, which was a special that they aired during the halftime show of the Super Bowl. I don't remember what the halftime show of the Super Bowl was that year, but I guarantee you that the Rock Mankind empty arena match was significantly better than whatever the halftime show was. That was actually, for you TV fanatics out there, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that was the same Super Bowl where Family Guy had its debut. It aired its pilot episode right after the Super Bowl. So a bit of that 99 Super Bowl, quite historic. And if memory serves me right, it was... God, was it Falcons and Broncos? Because that was one of those boring Super Bowls ever. But anyway, the empty arena match, if you haven't seen that, I highly recommend checking that out because it's hilarious. That one's like, okay, the I Quit match is this dramatic, violent affair. The Raw 99 match is this famous moment that was also a huge turning point in the Monday Night Wars. I should bring that up famously, where Tony Schiavone drove viewers away from WCW by announcing that Mankind was going to win the title, thinking that that was going to screw WWE out of the ratings, when it had the reverse effect. So not only did it represent, not only was this huge, emotional moment, but it represented a huge turning point in the Monday Night Wars as well. So yeah, all that going on. The empty arena match is their funniest match. I think it's hilarious. It's basically just Rock doing shtick. And if you want to see Rock do shtick, watch that match. It's kind of great. So, Rock and Mankind, I thought they had one of the defining rivalries of the Attitude Era and really wanted to bring that up as part of this list. So, from one Mick Foley match to another, number 9, I've got Triple H versus Cactus Jack in a street fight from Royal Rumble 2000. This match had the very important distinction of being the match that I felt really put Triple H on the map as a main event superstar. He'd already won the WWF title up to that point. He'd already had the match with Vince where Stephanie turned on Vince and they did that whole shebang. But really, I felt like it was this match that really firmly put the torch in Hunter's hands as the top heel in the company and made him believable in that spot. Again, super violent match. One of my favorite matches, one of my personal favorite title matches of all time, actually. Great build-up, great rivalry with Mick Foley coming back as Cactus Jack, feeling as if the Cactus Jack persona was the only one violent enough and ruthless enough to take on this version of Triple H and take on what Triple H had evolved into. And it was just a wild, brutal, crazy, hardcore match. They had a Hell in a Cell match the next month that was really sad because Foley's career ended with that match, but even though it ended, but it didn't end. We all know. But really, it was this match specifically, the Royal Rumble 2000 match, that really served as a high point for the end of Foley's career and the start of Triple H being basically one of the MVPs of the WWE, if not the MVP of the WWE, because, Austin was on the shelf at this point, Taker was on the shelf, Rock was the babyface, but you needed that heel to go up against Rock and to kind of carry the company while Rock was being built up to eventually take the title off of him. And I thought this match was superb at making everybody look good and giving Triple H that extra something that he needed to really kind of firmly establish him as one of the top stars of the era. Now, some people could argue that Triple H being made into the star he became had a negative impact on the company because he never went away. That's neither here nor there. I'm not here to debate that. But I will say Triple H in 2000, I'd be hard-pressed to find a wrestler that had a better year than Triple H did in 2000 because he was just on fire the entire year and did great all year round. And he was the MVP of the WWF at that time. So, and this was really the start of it. It was really this match right here. So if you haven't seen this epic encounter between Cactus Jack and Triple H at Royal Rumble 2000, I highly recommend checking it out because it's great. Now, at number 8, we have another series of matches, some of it also relating to Royal Rumble 2000. Specifically, the series of matches involving the Hardy Boys, Edge and Christian, and the Dudley Boys. They had ladder matches, they had tables matches, they had TLC matches. They had about every type of match you could possibly imagine, except Hell in a Cell, which is the one thing I think is missing. If they had been given Hell in a Cell, I mean, that would have been perfect, but it really started at No Mercy 1999, which was the end of the Terry Invitational Tournament, where the winners of the Hardy Boys and Edge and Christian series of matches would gain the managerial services of Terry Runnels. And it ended in match 5, which was the ladder match at No Mercy, which was a match that changed the business forever, for better or worse. You know me, I'm not the biggest proponent of multi-man ladder matches because really the difference between these matches that these teams had and what the multi-man ladder matches you see today, I'll get into that right now, I guess. The teams back then had a reason to be in these matches together, whether they hated each other or they were the best teams to be in that spot, they were the top contenders to be in those spots, whatever the case was. Those 3 teams, the Dudleys, Edge and Christian, and the Hardy Boys, belonged in those spots. So even though the matches were these wild spot fests, there was still that element of hatred and competition there that is kind of missing from the multi-man ladder matches you see today, where it's like, okay, what 4 teams can we just throw in there into a match? Or what 8 guys can we throw out there for a Money in the Bank ladder match? The guys in the Money in the Bank ladder matches today feel like interchangeable cogs. Like anybody can be in those matches. Back then, nobody else but these 3 teams could have done these matches or could have been involved in these matches. And that's why these matches have kind of stood the test of time at least a little bit, and why they're so revered. Because really it's they were the ones that belonged in these matches. But like I said, it started with No Mercy 1999, the Edge and Christian versus Hardy Boys ladder match, which did so many innovative spots and really brought that extra element to the ladder match, which was tag team action and all the crazy visuals that they delivered, like what was jokingly called the Wile E. Coyote cam, where you get the top level camera view of the big falls off the ladder, and the seesaw spot involving multiple ladders. And I remember back in the day when Razor and Shawn Michaels had their second ladder match and they brought out a second ladder, that was like, holy shit. And the commentators were even debating, is that legal? Can they do that? Can you use a non-regulation ladder that they didn't start with? Here it's like these guys were just going for broke and using everything they could and every ladder that was around the ringside. So it was this wild and crazy match that really set the tone and really is kind of, I would argue, again, for better or worse, it's a more influential match on today's modern wrestling than the WrestleMania 10 ladder match between Shawn and Razor. Even though I would argue the Shawn and Razor one is a better match, I think this one, the No Mercy 99 match, is more influential on what younger wrestlers try to do with ladder matches today. Then we would move on to Royal Rumble 2000, which was the first pay-per-view encounter between the Hardy Boys and the Dudleys, where they would have the first ever tables match, which was a wild, crazy match that they would have in Madison Square Garden. Very, very good match. I would still argue to this day the best tables match ever. Tables matches typically suck, to be perfectly honest. I can probably name only a few that are any good. I like Steiner's and Dudley's at that one Bound for Glory in 2007. And the Hardys and the Dudleys had another one on an episode of SmackDown that was pretty good. But other than that, like, tables matches are rarely good. But this one was really awesome because, again, it was just crazy spots, crazy action. The Dudleys brought that more brawling style to it, which really counterbalanced the Hardys' high-flying style very nicely. And again, all 3 teams, they brought something different to the table. The Hardy Boys were like the Rockers. They were the high-flying spectacle types. The Dudley Boys were the wild and crazy brawlers. I guess, for lack of a better comparison, they would be like the Demolition or the Road Warriors or the Blackjacks, or so like they're the brawlers. They're those type of guys. And then you have Edge and Christian, who are like would end up becoming like the shit chicken heels, like a WCW Cruiserweight Champion Chris Jericho type, who was really obnoxious but really funny too. So they all brought different things to the tables. Hardy's brought the spots, Dudley Boys brought the violence, Edge and Christian brought the personality. So that really built in nicely to their trilogy of TLC matches, which would, well, the WrestleMania 2000 match technically isn't a TLC match, but it might as well be, considering that they used everything. But the chemistry that all three teams had was really felt in these matches. I think their WrestleMania 2000 match is still my favorite one. The TLC match they had at SummerSlam 2000 was also very good. WrestleMania X7, a lot of people praise that one as the best, and I think it's fun. I like the addition of the corner men getting involved, like Spike Dudley and Lita and Rhino. But other than that, I think it pales in comparison to the other two, the WrestleMania 2000 one and the SummerSlam one. But still a very entertaining match. This is probably where I would have done the Hell in a Cell with these three teams, because I felt like they deserved Hell in a Cell, to be perfectly honest. And by the time they got through the SummerSlam match, it was like, God, these teams have done everything. What else is there left to do? WrestleMania X7 doing TLC again just kind of felt like more the same. Like, we've kind of already seen this. Hell in a Cell, I think, would have given them that extra, like, oh, we're going to give them this now. And it's this larger-than-life match, and I think that would have been a more worthwhile endeavor, but that's just me. But like the TLC matches are fun. They kind of popularized the crazy spot fests, which are still around today, again, for better or worse, but very influential, and the fingerprints of those matches can still be felt today. So if you want to know where all the craziness started with the Money in the Banks and all of that other stuff, check out those matches I just named, and you'll get an idea. All right, and number 7, I have the series of matches between Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock. Their biggest matches, and they had several matches, but their biggest ones were the two WrestleMania main events, WrestleMania 15 and WrestleMania X7, and their WrestleMania 15 rematch at Backlash 1999, which has the famous spot where they're on the announce table, Rock grabs the camera and is filming the crowd, and then he pans over and catches a shot of Steve Austin flipping him off, and then takes the stunner. One of the greatest moments in any match ever. Like, it's one of those things, like, you want to know what made Austin and Rock stars? It's stuff like that. Like, that's the stuff that makes you a star. It's those character moments like that. That are just great. And you can't, like, teach that. You can't replicate it. It's just, it was perfect for them, and they were just so creative and so great together and had such amazing chemistry. And again, it's that clash of personality. Austin was this rough, tough, Texas redneck brawler type, and The Rock was this Hollywood pretty boy. So making Rock the corporate champion was brilliant. But also, they were just so different from one another, but over the top and charismatic all the same. So when people say that Austin and Rock really defined the Attitude Era, they really did. Whether together or separately, they were just the two most exciting characters during that time period. And I loved going back and watching their stuff. Even the stuff building up the matches was terrific. Like the famous the beer bath segment where Austin brought out the beer truck. One of the, probably, aside from the Austin 3:16 speech at King of the Ring 1996, probably my favorite Austin promo ever, where he said he was going to roll into the SmackDown Hotel and burn that son of a bitch. No, what did he say? I'm going to roll into the SmackDown Hotel, check into room 316, and burn that son of a bitch to the ground. Like, that is just awesome stuff. And really indicative of, like, the personality and the excitement that the Attitude Era was able to capture. And I just love their stuff together. And again, like, they have 2 WrestleMania main events under their belt. The Backlash 99 match, I feel, is an underrated classic, and just terrific stuff that these guys did. And WrestleMania X7 is specifically important because for those of you who are longtime viewers of my videos, I did a video talking about where I felt like the Attitude Era came to an end. I think it was that match where it came to an end. For me personally, Austin's heel turn was the end of the Attitude Era. And a lot of people will debate me on that, and that's fine. But for me, the Attitude Era really came to an end with that match, so it's significant for that. Again, I wish they never turned Austin heel, but that's what we were given. So, yeah, Austin Rock's matches, wanted to bring attention to those because those are stellar. Number 6, another Stone Cold Steve Austin one. Steve Austin versus Vince McMahon in a steel cage match at St. Valentine's Day Massacre in 1999. This is one of the ultimate payoffs, probably the ultimate payoff that the WWE did during this era, and one of the greatest payoffs they ever did, because Austin and McMahon had been feuding for a year at this point, really from the post-Mania 14 Raw all the way up to this point, so almost a year. And during that entire time, it was one of the most intense rivalries, really the rivalry, more so than Austin and Rock, the rivalry that defined the era. But the problem with it, though, is Vince McMahon's not a wrestler. So how are you going to get a match out of it? And that was kind of the problem, because I don't think anybody really envisioned that McMahon would be like an active performer in the ring and that we would ever get that match for real. If we did, it would be a case where if Austin wins, he gets 5 minutes alone with McMahon and Austin would just beat the tar out of him. And that would have worked. But to really set this rivalry apart, you really had to have that match. And they gave it to us in February of 1999 in one of the most satisfying payoffs they ever did, because you had Vince, who was this hated heel. You wanted to see Austin beat the ever-living shit out of him. He screwed Austin out of the title in September. And ever since then, he'd fired Austin. He had brought Austin back under a restrictive contract where Austin wasn't allowed to lay a hand on him. He screwed him out of the Royal Rumble, and it just got to this point. It was like, we just want to see Austin beat the ever-living shit out of that son of a bitch. And boy, oh boy, did they deliver. Excellent, excellent stuff. This is a wonderful payoff. And this is what I remember a few years ago when they did the Cena-John Laurinaitis match. Everyone hated it. And it's kind of the same principle. It's like, well, you got this hated heel and you got this baby face. Theoretically, we should want to see the heel get his ass kicked. Here's the problem. Most of the audience doesn't even like the baby face, so we don't care. And their rivalry made no sense, because it's like, how is Cena not the corporate champion? Like, why is corporate not backing Cena? Because it's obvious that he's the golden boy. But here, you had Austin, who was this super rebellious character, going up against straight-laced corporate conservative Mr. McMahon, and the audience, the blue-collar audience, was able to live vicariously through Austin's rebellion. This rivalry was natural, so doing this one-sided squash match where Austin basically beats McMahon pillar to post, knocks him off the side of the cage in a very scary spot, takes the mic and says, "I'm not winning like that, it's bullshit. If you want me to finish this can of whoop ass, give me a hell yeah. Hell yeah!" And all of that, it was just amazing, and really demonstrates when you dedicate to a storyline and you make the fans want something, the payoff will be worth it. And this is a perfect example of it. I don't know what star rating Meltzer gave this match, but I don't care, because this is like the perfect thing to do, especially heading into WrestleMania. And it's like, all right, Austin's got to win the belt back at Mania, but before there, he has to get over the McMahon roadblock, and this is the perfect way to do it. So I thought this was great. I thought it was stellar. Perfect pay-per-view attraction, especially heading into WrestleMania. And how often do I feel like the pay-per-view in between Royal Rumble and WrestleMania is worth it? How often do I feel like it's like, they really don't need a pay-per-view? Because I've said that a lot on this channel. They don't really need a pay-per-view in between WrestleMania and Royal Rumble. They can pretty much just go from the Rumble straight to WrestleMania. But this case, absolutely the February pay-per-view was worth it, without question, because I want to see McMahon get his ass kicked. And at the end of the day, that's what matters most. Make the audience want something and then deliver. And then you've got Austin winning the title to look forward to at WrestleMania, so huzzah! It's just all great stuff. All great stuff. So, moving right along from there. From Bad Blood 1997, one of the most famous matches of all time, The Undertaker versus Shawn Michaels in the first ever Hell in a Cell match. One of my personal favorite matches of all time. It's up there in... If it's not my number one favorite match of all time, it's in the top 3. I like the match that much. It's just one of the most perfectly constructed matches ever. And again, very simple. You have a heel that keeps getting away from getting his ass kicked, and now he's stuck in a situation where the babyface, who's a killer, for lack of a better term, is going to kick his ass. And the entire match is basically Shawn Michaels getting destroyed and trying to find some way to get out of hell. And to tell that story, I thought the match was perfectly constructed and delivered on some of the greatest visuals in WWE history. And again, they helped define the era, like the over-the-top violence, the over-the-top visuals and the crazy visuals and the more cinematic nature that WWE was moving towards during the Attitude Era. All of that was captured in this match. And what I think my favorite thing, besides all the key spots and the finish, which we all know, I think my favorite thing in the match is Shawn Michaels beating up a cameraman just so the medics will go in there, help the cameraman, so Shawn can get the hell out of there because he doesn't want to be in there with Undertaker anymore. And they did a lot of things like that worked, like Undertaker no-selling the super kick, sweet chin music. It just helped tell the story, oh my God, Shawn is fucked, and I want Undertaker to destroy him. And everything just kind of fed into that. And that led into the ending where a bloodied Shawn Michaels is just beaten to a pulp. But then Kane shows up in one of the most memorable debuts of all time, rips the door off the cell, tombstones Undertaker, makes his presence known against his brother, and then Shawn Michaels crawls out of a pool of his own blood to get the quick pin on the Undertaker. So, again, it's one of the greatest matches of all time and one of the defining matches of the era. One of the matches that helped set the WWF attitude apart from what WCW was offering, because if you remember at the same time, they were doing the cage matches between Hogan and Piper. Not as good. not as good. Not as good as this. So, again, it was kind of like a clear indicator of WWF becoming the cool product. And kind of stealing some of WCW's thunder. So, very pivotal match for the era and one of my personal favorite matches of all time. Number 4, arguably the most significant match of the era, for all the wrong reasons, Bret the Hitman Hart versus Shawn Michaels for the WWF Championship at Survivor Series 1997. A lot has been said about this match. It was one of the few times in wrestling where shit got a little too real. And it poured over into the product and delivered on something that none of us will ever forget. Some will debate to this day that the whole thing was a work. I've often had my let me put it this way. If it came out tomorrow that the whole thing was a work, I wouldn't be surprised. Let me put it that way. Because there's a few things in there where I'm like, oh, they were filming Wrestling with Shadows at the same time all this was going on. That's convenient. And I don't know, some of it was a little too clean. Oh, they filmed everything except the punch that Bret gave Vince. That's convenient. And again, we'll probably never know all the full details about it, but like I said, it was one of the few times in wrestling where shit got a little too real, and it was that level of realism that, again, it kind of helped define the Attitude Era and allowed them to do more realistic storylines, even though certain storylines, the storylines weren't real. It kind of shaped the personality and forced the storylines to be a little bit more realistic and a little bit more believable. And it also led to the creation of arguably the greatest heel character in the history of the business in Mr. McMahon, because the fans turned on him after this match with the famous promo, Bret screwed Bret. And the end result was one of the greatest heels of all time. This could have easily been WCW's crowning achievement over the WWE. They were heading into Starrcade 1997, which had one of the hottest build-ups in the history of the business with Hogan and Sting. They had just gotten Bret Hart, who now is painted as the most sympathetic babyface in the world. This really could have been a knockout blow against the WWF, but Bret Hart was mishandled. Starrcade 97 didn't go as well as it should have. And Mr. McMahon was born. So really, like, WWF got all the tools they needed and got all the interest and the buzz that they needed. Shawn Michaels came out of this a hotter heel because of his presumed involvement in everything that happened, which set him up as the perfect villain to face Stone Cold Steve Austin and drop the belt to him at WrestleMania 14. But in any case, I've probably already talked too much about this match, because really what the hell else can I possibly add to the infamous Montreal Screwjob? But it is one of those, like, it's one of those where were you when this happened type of matches, because it is one of the most significant matches in the history of the business. Again, for all the wrong reasons, but its place in history cannot be denied. So one of the most significant matches of the era. But I already mentioned it, so let's just hop right into it. Number 3, Shawn Michaels versus Steve Austin for the WWF Championship at WrestleMania 14 with Mike Tyson as the guest enforcer. Awesome build-up to this. I did an entire video talking about how this was the perfect main event to do for this WrestleMania. You had the ultimate babyface of the era, the icon of the era, Steve Austin, winning the title off the hottest heel that he could possibly win it off of in Shawn Michaels, who got past Undertaker, got past Bret Hart with the Montreal Screwjob, acted like a total dickhead. DX were running rampant, doing whatever the fuck they wanted. And then you had Mike Tyson's involvement in that famous segment where he came to blows with Steve Austin, and then a few weeks later revealed that he had joined DX in one of my personal favorite moments. That was great stuff, where it's just, there's so much good stuff in the Attitude Era. It's like, you can't even compare it to today, but it's, all of this was so exciting, and, Mike Tyson made for a huge X factor to be involved in this whole thing, very much like Mr. T was at the first WrestleMania. And there's some interesting parallels here between this match and previous WrestleMania main events. I already mentioned the involvement of a celebrity, how Mike Tyson kind of parallels Mr. T's involvement, but also, probably more accurately would be Muhammad Ali, who was a guest referee at WrestleMania 1, and here Mike Tyson is the guest referee of WrestleMania 14. But also you had Shawn Michaels, who was, we all thought, the end of his career, back injury, was going to shelve him, and it was his duty to go out there and kind of pass the torch in a way to Steve Austin, which kind of parallels Hogan and Andre at WrestleMania 3, where Andre had to be coaxed back to do this huge main event match so he could put over Hogan, who was the big star of that era. So a lot of interesting WrestleMania parallels there, but in any case, as JR put it, the Austin era had begun that night. It's a significant match in the career of Steve Austin. It was the start of his main event run, the culmination of his build-up, which started, I would argue, as far back as WrestleMania 13, maybe even as far back as the Austin 316 promo. And it's a very historic match for that reason, one of the most significant matches of the era. And we keep bringing up WrestleMania. Let's go back one more WrestleMania. The match that I feel... Okay, I mentioned that WrestleMania 17 was the end of the Attitude Era. Let's go into the match that I feel started the Attitude Era. Bret Hart versus Steve Austin in the submission match at WrestleMania 13. Again, if you had to compare what WCW was doing at the time with what WWE was doing at the time, there's almost no comparison. WCW was just the cooler show with the NWO, and Sting's character development, which I've mentioned this before. The same month that WrestleMania 13 happened, WCW put on Uncensored 97, which was a throwaway show with a silly Battle Royal main event, and it outperformed WrestleMania 13 in the buy rates and delivered a huge ending where Sting finally attacked the NWO, one of the greatest moments in the history of WCW. Great stuff. So it just seemed like WCW was the hotter product at the time, and it was just a matter of time before WWE crumbled. But WWE was kind of stuck in its ways. It was kind of stuck in its more family-friendly production, its cartoony presentation, and this was the match that kind of... I guess you could argue matches like the Hollywood Backlot Brawl from 12 and the Boiler Room Brawl from WrestleMania or SummerSlam 1996 kind of started it. Really, it was the submission match that really showed, okay, things are about to change in a big way, because this match was wild, crazy, violent. You felt like both guys hated each other. The ebb and flow of the crowd was insane. It was like they were cheering for Austin. Half of them were cheering for Austin, who was supposed to be the heel. Half of them were booing Bret because, honestly, he came across like a crybaby, and he was starting to develop into that character. And, bringing an element of gray and shades of gray to a world of black and white, was a very risky move, and something that I'm sure a lot of people back then didn't want to do. But it really worked in this match. When you see stories like this and you see matches like this, it worked out beautifully. And that ending is one of the greatest moments in the history of professional wrestling, with a bloodied Steve Austin refusing to submit to the sharpshooter, with one of the greatest visuals, greatest images in the history of the business. Great stuff that put Steve Austin on the map more than anything else, and started in my opinion, getting the ball rolling on giving the WWF its attitude, because prior to that, they would shy away from blood. They would shy away from violence. They would shy away from realism and believable hatred between two guys. And this match showed that they were willing to not only go more into that direction, but also highlight it, showcase it, and throw it in your face. And if it was too much for you to handle, then get out of the kitchen. So, yeah, Bret Hart and Steve Austin, one of the greatest matches of all time. Excellent match, and one of the defining matches of the era. But last but not least, let's go into this match, which will be celebrating its 20th anniversary tomorrow. I'm filming this the night of June 27th. June 28th, 1998, we were treated to a match unlike any other. The second pay-per-view Hell in a Cell match, The Undertaker versus Mankind at King of the Ring, 1998. A match that, you want to talk about shit getting too real. I think I can count on one hand the number of times I've seen a match get a little too violent to the point where I'm sitting at home going, please stop this match. Good God Almighty, will someone please stop this match? That just stop. Somebody needs to just come out and put a stop to this now. Because I legitimately thought that Mick Foley was going to die right there live on pay-per-view. Off the top of my head, the only other match I can think of where I was screaming at the TV, stop the match, okay, stop it, just stop it, I don't care. Like, I don't care if any fans feel jilted, just stop the match, please. The only other time I can think of that happening was Eddie Guerrero and JBL at Judgment Day 2004, with Eddie doing that insanely sick blade job. But this match was so talked about at the time and so infamous that it felt like it almost, as much as the other matches on the show contributed positively to the Attitude Era, this one felt like, okay, has wrestling gone too far? Have we gone too far that this is what we're doing and this is what we're showcasing? A guy getting thrown off a 15-foot cell, getting up off the stretcher, and one of my more iconic moments from this match is when of smiling Mick Foley is standing up after getting up off the stretcher to go climb back up the cell, gets slammed through the roof of the cell, through the ring. Match is not stopped for whatever reason, and the match ends with that same guy who got thrown off the cell once and thrown through the cell once, and ends with him getting thrown on the thumbtacks twice. And it's like, Jesus Christ, what in the world is going on here that the business has been pushed to this point? And again, it was the Attitude Era, man, we got to go all out there. We got to go all in. We got to be crazy. We got to be death-defying. We got to be the most exciting and barbaric product around. And it got pushed to this limit where I felt like a human being was actually going to die on pay-per-view. And again, the merits of this match have been debated almost ever since the match took place. Was it too far? Is it even that good of a match? Is it Does it deserve the praise that it got at the time? Does it deserve this much attention? Is this match bad for business? Is it good for business? A debate that still rages to this day. I would argue that I would never want to see another wrestler put forth this much effort into a match ever again. I don't need to see... Like, every time Shane does it, where he jumps off the cell, and you can tell he's landing in a crash pad, and I'm like, dude, just... stop it, please. I don't want to see anybody die. That's not why I'm here. I don't want to see human beings die for my entertainment. But I do appreciate the effort, and when it was all said and done, it did deliver one of the most memorable matches of all time. And JR, again, for all of his famous calls, some of them from this match, good God Almighty, as God is my witness, he is broken in half, being one of them. One of my favorite calls in the history of professional wrestling, and one of my favorite calls of Jim Ross's career, came after the match was over. Undertaker had won, we were all said and done, and Jim Ross said, "This has been the most ungodly match that I think we will perhaps ever see." And to be perfectly honest, I think here we are 20 years later, I would still say, yes, this is the most ungodly match that I've ever seen. There have been attempts to try and replicate it. You know, Foley went through the roof of the cell in his match with Triple H. But you could tell that he was landing in like a really safe like padding or whatever, or like a breakaway portion of the ring. So it didn't quite have that element of danger to it. Rikishi fell into a bed of hay. Shane, you could tell, was jumping into a crash pad. You know, there have been some sick and violent matches, but this one was particularly sick and particularly violent, and just a nasty time all around, and made for some great highlight packages, for if nothing else. It made for some amazing highlight packages, and the production team seemed to have a field day with it right after the match happened. But really, for me, in a lot of ways, this is almost like the wrestling equivalent of, like, or at least the WWE equivalent of the Joe Theismann injury, where they just kept showing it over and over and over and over again. It's like, this is barbaric. Like, this is just crazy. But yeah, this match is one of the most talked about matches of all time, and it turns 20 tomorrow. So that was really the inspiration for me doing this match. Oh, it's the 20th anniversary of Hell in a Cell, Undertaker, Mankind. I should do like a top 10 for the Attitude Era, just because. So yeah, the Attitude Era gave us a lot of great moments, a lot of memorable matches, and basically I just wanted this video to highlight those great moments and those great matches. And if you're younger and you didn't live through that era and you haven't seen a lot of this stuff, hopefully this list will serve as kind of a nice list of recommendations of stuff to check out on the WWE Network. So you're welcome. But that is all I have for you in this video. Thank you all for watching. Like I said, I'm going to have a few more videos lined up for you throughout the week and as we get closer to the weekend. But that is all I have for you now. So y'all stay tuned. I'm going to have more for you later on. But for right now, y'all have a good one.